Hello out there on the internet. Great to see you. Sorry, we all clustered back. I hope this is the biggest panel of the week. It should be because we're here for Bio 2024 here in San Diego. So I'm Dave Whelan, former CEO of Bioscience LA. Longtime Angelino, but longtime business builder at the intersection of technology, health, and wellness. And I think this is my third or fourth time leading a healthcare discussion with Ivy Family Office Network. So super excited, Marty. I must do either something right or you can't find anyone else, but whatever it is, I'm happy to be here. So we've got a huge agenda with a big panel, and I'm gonna let everyone introduce themselves. We're gonna mix things up a little bit because Mike next to me has got a dash out, and he and I have spent a lot of time together, including a panel yesterday. So kick things off, Michael Banyas, NIH, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and why you're here.
So my name's Michael Banyas. I am the program manager for the NIH, for one of the NIH's SBIR programs, Small Business Innovation and Research. NIH, a little bit unknown to people because they think of us as typically giving out academic awards, but NIH gives out $1.4 billion, which is about 4% of the NIH budget, to startups and entrepreneurs to develop products, commercialized products to help support NIH's research and mission. The amount each institute, NIH has 26 institutes and centers that each institute has budgeted, is based on the amount of extramural money, that's grant money going out, based on their extramural budget. So I am in the National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities, and I have about $20 million per year to give out awards. My colleagues at Cancer have like 200 million. My colleagues in Aging, I think they just got a bump in the federal budget. I think Todd's got like 140 million, but we give those out in phase 1 and phase 2 awards. So phase 1 is about $300,000, and that's a proof of concept. Phase 2 is $1.9 million, and this is essentially grants that we don't take any equity. Companies can say that they're an NIH funded company, but phase 2 awards are typically, phase 2 awards are for commercialization purposes. One of the great things about these grants, specifically as the phase 1, so in the Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, I focus on health disparities population. So I am not a PhD by training. I focus on health services. So the NIH defined health disparities populations are minority health populations, people living with disabilities, low socioeconomic status, such as Medicaid populations, rural health, and LGBTQ. Where this is a great opportunity for companies in the market is these aren't poor people that aren't getting healthcare. These are customers that aren't being served, that need services.
I like the guy in his living room.
So it is a market opportunity. It's just the product maybe it's not culturally competent. It's not accessible. So one of the things that I like doing in my phase 1 awards is if company X is doing something really well in New York or in Northern California, and they want to get into a Latino market, or they want to get into a rural market, apply to us. You know, we kick the tires a little bit differently on these companies because we're basically judging the science, and there's rocks that we see overturn in some of these concepts that really help provide a stronger scientific foundation. But you can use that phase 1 money we'll take on the risk, and you go into that market to help create health equity. And you can apply to multiple markets. For example, I've got one great device company in Chicago. They apply for multiple phase 1s to go into Puerto Rico, into rural communities, into African-American communities, into pediatrics. So those are just some of the opportunities. You can apply up to 3 times a year to the general NIH application, which is April, March, and January. And then there's specific funding opportunities that we have to help provide guidance to the market. For example, I have a health disparities focused innovation funding opportunity, which includes aspects such as furthering clinical trials or using big data or digital therapeutics. And that has a receipt date of both June and December. We're going to be coming out with one to put money into tribal communities and make an investment there and take advantage of developing products for the Indian Health Services new electronic health record system, but also invest in Indian country and help those entrepreneurs come up with local problems, because because we believe that all health solutions start at a local level and they're community reflected. In addition, we have a women's health funding opportunity focusing on health disparities, which aligns perfectly with the White House's executive order in March, the March executive order, which changes the conversation of focusing on healthcare research and products on the lifespan, on a lifespan which has traditionally been linked to childbirth. And there's going to, one of the things I've noticed, so I go to a lot of the women's health investment events. It's very exciting, like especially the attention that's being given. There's not a lot of market guidance on what is important. Like you hear about endometriosis, I know I mispronounced that, and menopause. There's not a lot being talked about with like teen girls or like leveraging HRSA safety net programs, which receive billions of dollars a year. Dave, don't take a selfie right now.
Not taking a selfie.
No,
right?
Dave, put it down. Dave, put it down. It's distracting.
He was looking at the audience, he wasn't looking at us.
Keep going, women's health.
I've been rooming with him for the last week, so that's why we're fighting like a very
It's a true story.
No, it's true. We're sharing a 2-bedroom suite at the Homewood Suites, so that's why I'm like, yeah. So anyway, but it's gonna provide research priorities to what is important for federal research, but most importantly, what is recognized in making sure that underserved communities, minority health communities aren't left behind in developing products and women's focused research, so that there's an even greater health disparity, but also helping the market recognize where there's market opportunity to serve customers.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you for ending with the women's health thing, because actually Joan and I will be back tomorrow talking about women's health at 11
And
o'clock.
I'll give you a bunch of business cards to hand out because I'm gonna be on
Awesome.
the flight.
Great.
Yeah, with that, Joan, tell us about what you were doing.
So, hi, my name is Joan Koerber Walker. I have the privilege of leading the fastest growing biotech sector in the United States. So, I come from Arizona. Arizona is rapidly growing. It is a hotbed of healthcare real estate investment with over 6 million square feet of life science infrastructure under development right now, as well as 128 acres of virgin land sitting right next door to Mayo Clinic. There is no opportunity like that in the country. So when we look at,
And you have an expanding airport as well.
we have a great area.
Always expanding there, right?
So, but what people don't realize when you think of Arizona is, for those of us that are old enough to remember what it was like before commercial, air conditioning. Nobody in their right mind lived in Arizona, in the summertime when it was 110 degrees and there was no air conditioning. What that did is it created what is today Phoenix, Arizona is the 5th largest city in the United States, and it has the youngest infrastructure in the country. It has the youngest electrical grid, it has the youngest water systems, it has the youngest highway systems. And because of that, the ability to scale and grow becomes, astronomical. But taking those kinds of investments aside, we also are the home of the Barrow Neurological Institute, of the Translational Genomics Research Institute, of City of Hope, of MD Anderson, and so many other places where we are focusing on addressing the unmet needs of people. Because it's not just patients, it's the people that care for the patients, it's the families of those people that are affected by disease. And the reality is, and at the Bio Convention, which Marty referenced, there are now over 22,000 known diseases. And we have treatments for about 2,000 of them. And so as we continue to go forward, and as I look at the future, because I will be part of the Medicare population next year, we need to come up with answers because as we get older, we need more. And as an economist, I also recognize, since we talked about the economy earlier today, that we have, as the people that control the majority of the wealth in the world, okay, in the United States, in the Western Europe, okay, we are the 1%, okay, get over it, we are. And we are also the ones that are gonna pay the bills. And so as we look at that, we have to recognize that as the baby boom hits its peak spending years, that is the economic challenge of our generation. And the only way that, and I have these conversations in Congress on a regular basis, the only way we will be able to address what is coming at us relative to cost is to innovate out of the problem. So I'm gonna pass the baton to the next person in
Perfect.
line.
George, Schwartz, tell us a little about what you're working on, which is a little bit of a different approach to healthcare, but it's gonna feed into the whole story when we get around the table.
Hi, just by way of background, I worked in a significant family office for the Bass Brothers from Fort Worth and Greenwich for years prior to getting involved in the business in which I currently live, which is the world of molecular diagnostics. I have been working on for the past several years a very innovative and novel way to develop a rapid point of care nucleic acid amplification diagnostic system, which will allow for the doctor to take the device to his patient and perform the test by extraction of a sample, inserting it into a cartridge, putting it into the box, and having an answer in 20 minutes. This got started with the plan of trying to find a way to solve the COVID dilemma that everybody was trying to solve. And the more I got into it, the more I realized that this actually could be done for a fraction of the cost if I went to the animal healthcare market first, because there's no FDA requirement for this testing. So trying to find the perfect product market fit, as they taught me back in Fort Worth, came back to help me. And I realized that the perfect market for this was the equine veterinarian. He has to go see, or she has to go see their animal. And today, if they go, before this product is created, when they go, they have to draw a sample, put it in their bag, go back, wrap it up, run to FedEx, wait for a couple of days for the reference lab to send them back an answer. Meanwhile, the horse could be highly infectious and contagious, and could spread throughout the entire barn. This happens at Santa Anita Racetrack, happens at horse shows around the world. These animals are worth a fortune. This is a big issue, which highly price elastic for the use of for this purpose. So this is an opportunity, unlike most in the world of diagnostics, where the doctors actually make money. People don't seem to look at that as a real issue most of the time, but this is the price which I can sell this cartridge to, much like an inkjet cartridge would be, is at a profit margin of about 80 to 90%, and I can afford to give away the instrument for virtually nothing. And having a globally installed base with very low cost, almost no customer acquisition cost, and a profit margin of 80 to 90%, where the equine veterinarian has a chance to make 100% on top, or 200% on top of this, and serve his patient better, faster, and less expensively, and immediately. So that's what I'm up to.
Awesome, thank you. And we'll come back to sort of what that looks like for the rest of the healthcare market and how you're getting there in a little bit. Jason Barbour, focused on AI in healthcare, which is probably not the first time AI has been mentioned this week during bio. But tell us what you're doing.
And maybe the 1,000th.
Yeah, exactly.
Major topic of bio this week. Well, first I want to thank Marty for the invitation to talk to the IvyFON network today. So my story is that I'm really a career machine learning and AI person as applied to biomedical data. And the core of my training happened at University of California, San Francisco. And what I was doing there was I was pairing complex measurements from local genomics and cellular biology labs directly to clinical outcomes from patients, as well as pharmacy records. And it was an early instance of a multi-omics approach to try to understand variation in treatment response. In other words, we were trying to understand why some patients were responding to treatment and others weren't. Did that during my PhD. I went on to join the faculty in the Department of Medicine, and all told, I was an NIH-funded investigator for about 10 years before leaving to come into industry. About 6 years ago, we created Synkrino. We came out of Y Combinator as an AI platform built for the purpose of discovering novel drug targets, again, learning directly from the experience of patients in the clinic. And so about halfway through that journey, having built the platform and having identified a number of novel drug targets, having started to build some new drugs and bring them towards the clinic, we started to see a second phenomenon which surprised us, which was that we and many of the other companies that had come through YC, we were all very good at finding new targets and building new drugs. But when you went and talked to some life science investors, and even in some cases pharma, they hadn't heard of the target yet. They hadn't even in some cases heard of the disease biology we're talking about, and it was perceived as a ball of risk. Sometimes we would get the response, well, this is very interesting. Please call us when you've cleared phase 1. Well, the reason we called them was to get the investment to be able to clear phase 1. And so my company and literally 100 others that were built around the same time have built assets that are new, they're novel, they're potentially high impact. To your point, there are 22,000 diseases, and our technologies allow us to much more precisely target these diseases and come up with differentiated targets and solutions for these conditions. So about 3 years ago, I was very puzzled about this during JP Morgan in early 2021. And there was no JP Morgan because of COVID. So I got on the phone with a bunch of my friends and we started talking about this. I put my statistical hat back on and went a very different direction. Again, I'm really a career biomedical person, but we started building statistical models to ask, is there a different way to think about investing in these early to mid-stage programs that have so much potential impact for patients? And what grew out of that is what we call Synkrino Development Company, also SDC, different from what Kevin's doing over here, very different industry. But we just went public about a month ago, and essentially we've built an AI-guided platform to be able to identify, select, and capitalize early to mid-stage therapeutics programs, bring them through phase 1 to the point where they're de-risked, where pharma will really like them, take them up, and take them the rest of the way, so we can bring an enhanced set of solutions to patients. So that's sort of me in a rather large nutshell, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. And coming in from Zoom, Norm Friedland, really interesting investment strategy that I had the privilege of hearing about a few weeks ago at one of these meetings. So Norm, really excited to have you back, and great bookend to what Michael was talking
Since
about.
I have to leave,
Yeah.
if anyone has any further questions about NIH-funded companies that might be good to further support, or has any questions about the SBIR program, please email Marty or Dave. Or if you are interested in just kind of picking my brain about market opportunities within health disparities populations and just where the market trends are. Love to have those conversations because your insight is always valuable. Thank you very much, Marty.
Yeah, if you have any documents you can share with us and forward it to me.
Yeah, I think one area aside from women's health that I think is very underutilized is probably people with disabilities, either from birth or to, as you acquire a disability. Also LGBTQ products, I think there's definitely a market opportunity there as well.
And an engagement opportunity with all of us.
In engagement, yes. So one of the things I'm very specialized in is engagement with clinical trials, especially since the FDA has a draft guidance out right now on making a diversity plan a part of clinical trials. I came from the All of Us research program, I help set up the FQHCs, the federally qualified health centers, the clinical protocol, the FQHC. So I think there's an enormous opportunity there to expand clinical trials to underserved populations, especially in community-based work, community-based clinics.
And we can take more questions on that since you have
Please,
to
and you and I know all conversations.
Absolutely.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much, and thank you for Marty for having two people from Connecticut. Yeah,
go. Hey, I got married in Connecticut.
three people, great.
Me too.
That's right, that's right.
Norm, what's your connection to Connecticut? And then tell us you are.
Hey, so the word disability that Michael just mentioned, I'm sitting here with my leg in a brace for another 8 weeks, having torn up my knee. So I apologize that I'm not able to be with you all. It looks like it's a fun group. Hello, Joan. Nice to see you again.
Hey,
And one
Norm.
of these days we will connect. So I really only have 3 or 4 points to make that really will support everything that has been said. Number one, the science, the life science that's being discovered almost daily is unbelievable. It's coming from places like TGen. It's coming from places like the Integrated Genetics Institute out of Berkeley. I mean, it's just stuff that just was science fiction 5 years ago is here today, and stuff 5 years from now is going to make what we have today look pretty prosaic. So that's kind of point number one. Point number two, and Jason is talking about this, and it's going to be interesting to hear his further explanations. I guess the second point is that in the in the investment world for venture capitalists and private equity people and institutional investors, there's always been support from the philanthropic asset group. And Jillian Adams, who's the CEO of Stand Up to Cancer, is going to have a presentation at this group tomorrow. And he's going to talk about the importance of bringing in large scale, at scale philanthropic dollars for the research and the developments that people like Jason and George and others are discovering. We're talking about a lot of money. I shared some information with David of a chart that I found that shows something like $270 billion of philanthropic assets are floating around for life science. And what FullSky does, what my company does, is we try to connect these enterprises with the philanthropic assets, along with the private investors, the VCs, the private equity people, to really leverage that kind of money. And some examples of that are some of the companies we're working with. One is out in Phoenix, Synalysis, which literally has a world-changing cancer therapeutic technology where there's no surgery, there's no radiation, there's no chemo, and the kids who have otherwise untreatable brain cancer go into the MRI machine. 45 minutes later, they come out, and the next day they go to school. And we've got 5 or 6 other companies like that we're working with in the cancer area, a company called ABS in the cardio area, really exciting clinical research organization out of DC called Uncommon Cures. And so these opportunities are there. And what we're really saying to the private investor, to the VC investor is, look, think about this capital. It's very patient capital, and it's non-dilutive capital. It doesn't seek to control, but it seeks to support the companies and the entrepreneurs who have the mission. So the last point I guess I want to make is, and I've said this before, is healthcare doesn't look at your FICO score. And that's, something we all kind of know, and we kind of try not to think about it. But unfortunately, we know people, hopefully not people who are close to us, but we know people who've gotten sick. And the fact that there are these 20,000 quote rare diseases that for which there are no treatments. I mean, if it's a rare disease and you have it, it isn't rare. So I thank Marty for the opportunity to really enlighten the institutional funders, the VCs, to think about how to source this philanthropic capital for the kind of solutions that George and Jason and other people are bringing to the table. David, thank you very much.
Perfect, Norman. I want to stick with you just for one moment to kind of dive into the funding landscape because, there's been a lot of conversations about that, down the street at Bio this week and obviously this year. So, this has been a slow period after a lot of excitement coming out of pandemic and a lot of investment in new technologies. How can what you're building, which is really exciting, and then obviously what Michael Banyas just talked about, everyone should be looking to non-dilutive capital. This mechanism that you're building, what's the timeline and how can these companies take advantage of something like that?
So I was just at a conference 2 weeks ago before I ripped up my leg where somebody talked about the nuclear winter for life science venture capital. I'm not quite sure it's a nuclear winter. Maybe it's a thawing spring. We see signs of buds here and there, but unless you've got an AI story next to you, nobody's talking to you. What we believe is that large wealth managers who control these who advise these family offices, who have the private foundations, are a great audience for the stories of the companies that Jason and George represent, the companies that are in the Arizona bio environment, and by educating them on how their wealth managers, their family office clients can impactfully use their philanthropic assets, they can really unlock a lot of dollars. They can do it impactfully. We're not talking about something where you're going to write a check and 10 years from now, somebody's going to write a paper. We're talking about solutions that can be delivered almost immediately. And so we're really excited to be talking to some of these wealth managers. And I think you're going to see some shots on goal and some announcements by the end of the summer about how some of these wealth managers are going to sign up for this story.
Terrific, and that's great. Actually, since you and I talked about this a few weeks ago, had a chance to chat with Marty Tenenbaum, at Cancer Commons. I know there's some collaborations going on with what you're doing. So excited to see how these things come together. And Joan, what is that?
It's interesting. The Bio International Convention is here in San Diego going on right now. There are over 18,000 people at the convention center. As of Sunday, when I was sitting down with Bio Leadership, there were already over 62,000 partnering meetings that had been scheduled. But one of the big conversations was, where was the money? And as an economist, I look at the markets and I totally understand why the VCs are pulling back right now. They deal with uncertainty, and the phrase that I heard earlier this morning, other people's money. Okay. For the majority of VCs, they are responsible for other people's money. And so they have to look at risk differently than we do if we're running philanthropic capital, as I have, if we are doing family office capital, as I have. Venture capital is different. And so they are looking at how do they sustain their current portfolios. And that's what we're seeing. I think the other thing that's very interesting is the conversation around AI, I think at Bio this time was a lot more realistic. For those of you that are investors, AI does not de-risk a company, nor does it make it more higher probability of a good exit. As a matter of fact, most of it is still smoke and mirrors. And so there are some things where in healthcare, we are going to lead the way in AI. Pattern recognition makes a huge difference. high power computing, being able to identify, as Jason is the higher probability that a compound will survive in the clinic. Okay, those are huge things, and you and I need to talk about that offline because I've got some ideas for you. But those are big issues. But at the end of the day, a great idea will never become a viable product or service that can make life better for a person, which by the way is the definition of innovation. If it doesn't get through the key milestones that makes that company investable. And so.
But Joan, you have to take credit, and I apologize for not reminding everybody. The Synalysis company, which has got this breakthrough cancer technology that is literally going to be a world-changing technology. That the big bang moment for that was in Phoenix with the Ivy family that wrote a $10 million check for an idea to bring a machine to the brain tumor center. And you know, yes, it was a $10 million check, but that's the basis for everything we're talking about. And we're so pleased about that. And you know, and I think we had the support of the Phoenix and the Arizona people to do that. So thank you.
You're welcome. And you know, to put that in perspective, when we talk about philanthropic capital, you know, structured investing, etc. So Catherine Ivy, who's a dear friend, lost her husband to glioblastoma. And she has made it her mission to eradicate that disease. And so, you know, through over $100 million of her personal family office investment, combined with more community investments from the NIH, from industry, from Dignity Health, Barrow Neurological Institute, we now have the first phase 0 clinical trials program in GBM in the world at scale in Phoenix at the Barrow. But that took 2 decades of partnerships all working together to create that, okay? One of the projects that I'm working on that we'll talk about later is to try and replicate the most successful life science philanthropy project in history, which is the Wellcome Trust. And we are working that, what most people don't know is that was actually created by an American in the UK. And what we are working on and what I hope to complete before I retire someday, long in the future, is replicating that here in the United States and basing it in Phoenix, Arizona. So, you know, there are great things that happen, as Norm says, when we all work on projects and those projects all come together.
Yeah, love that. We'll definitely come back to that. I didn't know about that. That's terrific. We talked about AI, and so you know, and Jason, you know, you have a publicly traded company.
We're not publicly traded.
So you said fund.
We're privately.
Okay, all right. So we'll tell. All right. So I misheard. But then just talk about what has that interest been, and how do you genuinely include AI in that story in a way that is not smoke and mirrors, which there's a lot of, as Joan said, and it really is adding value.
It's a great point. Well, we started, like I said, we started as an AI company when AI wasn't cool. So back when we called it machine learning.
By the way, you know, I studied AI in college,
Okay.
which was the 1900s. So, you know, nobody cared about that in the 1900s.
Yeah, no, it's cool now, but it wasn't always. And we were, I think, at a time, a bit of an oddity, the idea of using statistics and machine learning and computation to try to relate patterns in blood samples to clinical outcomes. I think some people thought, well, that's the domain just of biologists. What is really the place here for computation in that? The reason we moved forward on it is because we found drug targets that were novel, and we then proved them in the lab in ex vivo human samples. We demonstrated that we could identify targets, and that if we manipulated these targets, we could actually change the markers of disease for those patients. So we did it the old-fashioned way by proving it out. I think the next stage we ran into, and this goes to Joan's point, is that we still come into a landscape where there's a great deal of risk in the development of therapeutics. The truth is that many programs still fail in clinical trials. And so I think what's needed and what SDC, which launched last month, is doing is creating a different kind of financial risk framework for early stage assets to make it palatable to capitalize these programs and bring them out past phase one, where these programs really get legs, and then it really makes sense for pharma to take them the rest of the way. There's exists in many industries, but the idea of the valley of death, it's sometimes called, the innovator's dilemma. Someone very often has a great idea about a new product that's early stage, but it stalls out at the MVP stage and just can't make it over the hump. SDC has built a financial framework that acknowledges that probably only about 1 in 3 programs are going to make it from lead DC out past phase one. But borrowing financial techniques from other industries, but also extensively using AI, we've created a risk framework to be able to build an orthogonal index of these assets and bring them forward. All for the idea of being able to introduce many more high impact therapeutics into the clinic and ultimately for patients. So the use of AI is extensive in pharma, yes.
Can we ask you?
Yeah, absolutely, please, yeah, dive in.
When you get a chance, meet with in silico trials. They're on the Italian booth because they're the ones that kind of look at kind of.
Yeah, no, I've known Alex for a long time. We go way back.
Okay.
But no, and I really admire what Alex is doing. Alex Zavrankov at Silico, and they're actually one of the few AI companies that actually has the drug in clinical trial.
Yeah.
And so they've done it, and I think that's because he's very determined. Yeah. But we'd like to extend that opportunity to many more assets and many more companies to bring more benefit to more patients.
Yeah.
But it's true, I think it's pretty easy to attach AI or large language model to the name of your company these days. But again, it comes down to whether or not you can produce something where you can actually demonstrate clinical result, patient benefit.
Got it. And on that note, just on the therapeutic side, diagnostic side, we're sort of there's obviously a lot of data gathering to build models for for diagnostics. So how does AI fit into your development story today and in the future?
I've thought about it a fair amount and spoken with a number of people about it. In version 2.0, there could be a significant role for it in terms of collecting the read from each sample, the DNA read, and helping companies develop better medicines with that and identify new strains of viruses that are running around there. That's a more ambitious goal than I have today, but I'm glad that this absolutely will have that opportunity because it will create an enormous body of data for artificial intelligence to be employed productively with, I think.
And I think AI is gonna give, George, you and I talked about the One Health concept, before we came together, right? And the migration of innovations in animal health to human health and from human health to animal health, right? We're looking at seeing that going both ways right now. And, one of the things that AI is very good at is recognizing patterns. And there may be more opportunities, I think, as we start looking at the two sides of the One Health continuum to use advanced computing to identify where we might have crossovers that we can bring to market faster.
That's a great point. I spend a significant amount of my time talking to therapeutics companies that are on the order of 10 to 15 years old that have accumulated a vast amount of data and are aware that there's an opportunity for them to build powerful generative AI models and large language models. And I think if we can move forward with that and help those companies do that, the amount of new discovery we can unlock very extensive.
Yeah, and I think on that note, we're both working to improve the quality of care, but also the cost of care, and in particular reduce the time to bring products to market. And so, Joan, I think there's a lot just across the institutions you mentioned in Arizona, a lot of that going on. So how do you help to pull that together to get drugs to market faster or treatments?
Or at all.
Yeah, at all. Exactly. Healthcare in general.
Healthcare in general. So don't underestimate the importance of your vote in November. I'm not going to say which side is the better side to vote on, but the power of your vote. Okay. But the thing that we have to really think about is very often the decisions that are made at the federal level or at the state level have huge impacts on health development.
Yeah.
A good example of that currently is the Inflation Reduction Act. And no, we're not going to get into discussion if that's misnamed or not. But the Inflation Reduction Act had a very highly publicized portion, which is that Medicare can negotiate drug prices for what starts with 10 products and that will rapidly, over a short number of years, grow to over 100 of the most commonly used drugs. How they structured it, the minutia in the details of that has created disproportionate shifts in how we invest. So for instance, we have the opportunity to extend patent life on a monoclonal antibody for 4 years longer than we do on a small molecule drug. Well, that 4 years is the predominant time when the profit comes for any new medicine. And therefore, we have seen a disproportionate shift away from small molecule to large molecule. So for the non-scientists in the room, small molecule is normally a pill, okay? It is chemistry. You think back to junior high, okay? Large molecule, now we are taking things from living things, we are fermenting them, we are growing them, we are reusing them. That is biology. The difference is small molecule, your digestive system can digest, you can take it through your mouth, or you can absorb it through your skin. Large molecule has to be introduced predominantly into the bloodstream. And that's where you get infused drugs or injectable drugs. And so I will tell you, because I have a child, not a child anymore, he's 30, he'll always be my child, who has Crohn's disease, okay? He sits in a chair every 6 weeks and he has medicine infused in his arm. If you have a friend that is getting chemotherapy, they go through the same process. Those are large molecules. Okay, I don't know about you, I would much rather take a pill. Okay, by the way, and usually the pills are cheaper to make and easier to mass produce. And we are discouraging the creation of new health innovations right now that are pills because we didn't think about how we structured the law. And Kirsten Sinema, who was very involved in that, Senator Sinema, is a long-term friend, and I know there were a lot of discussions on, how to get that. But when you talk about sausage making in Washington, it is sausage making. So we have to think of those things. We also have to think about the fact that there are certain things that take longer. Okay, if we are going to find an alternative to what we currently have for Alzheimer's disease, which is basically nothing. If we are going to move away from treating cancer towards preventing cancer, which is the only way we're really going to bend that cost curve, we're going to have to do things differently. So when Michael was here, we talked about all of us. So this is something I challenge every single one of you that are listening to. So Google, NIH, all of us. And that is a research project where the National Institutes of Health are looking to sequence 1 million American genomes. And you can go to a medical center, you can be involved in this clinical trial, you make your health data available with your blood and other things. I will tell you, I was really upset when I found out I had to get on a scale. I didn't like that part. But the only way that we are going to find cures for these diseases is to have the data. And that is our opportunity to do that for animal health as well as for human health.
Yeah, terrific. And I want to come back to the big public support and big support for projects like this in a second that you mentioned. But final edition, I want to make an introduction. It's a perfect segue. So Sarfraz, you're late but on time because we we were talking about AI, we were talking about multiple sets of data, and you are in the healthcare industry, but you've worked across numerous other industries where you're looking at different ways to create value out of data. So please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you're working on, how you got here, and then we'll lead you into the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's been great. I was listening in, Joan and others. What I've been seeing during my time at Johnson & Johnson recently as well. To your point, I'm a computer scientist by background. Basically stumbled into data mining and machine learning early in my career, while Microsoft was, trying to build a search engine competing with Google, less than 5% market share at that point in time. And, sort of worked on spell corrections, core ranking problems with the search engine, built sort of the core data mining infrastructure at the company. Went on to do a couple startups, again in the data space, predominantly marketing analytics here in the Bay Area, and then most recently sort of started a company in the clinical trials space with Harvard Innovation Lab before getting into Johnson & Johnson, where basically led a group driving digital and AI strategy for the company across both our pharma portfolio, which is Janssen, as well as medical devices portfolio. And I think change in healthcare is slow, and as we've seen, I think we've really focused on driving core data strategy, building AI applications, not just Gen AI, but optimization and simulation capabilities, NLP, and some of the other cutting edge tech with both the R&D focus areas as well as supply chains and commercial go-to-market, if you will, right? My interest in the panel, as I'm spending some time on representing Mighty Capital here, we are essentially an early stage firm investing in anywhere between seed and Series A here in the Valley, invested in SaaS, and now, obviously AI products with Airbnb, Amplitude being a couple of notable investments over the last 3 funds the company's had. The check size goes anywhere between 1 to 5 million for companies that are heading towards a Series A, and we're really now focused beyond SaaS, clean tech, fintech, and enterprise, right? We're looking at the intersection, or at least I'm looking at the intersection of AI and healthcare. And I think absolutely resonate with most of the things the panelists have said. A few areas where we really care about, fall within core therapeutics, as well as, front office, back office, if you think about it, patient engagement, documentation, clinical decisioning, I think are some areas where AI can really make a difference, even if it's not like significant, but tangible optimization, 30-40% gains in efficiency. Back office, similarly, coding and revenue cycle management. But then more R&D focused areas, let's say with overall drug development process. For example, I've seen with J&J, clinical trials optimization, site selection, patient selection, drug discovery, which ties into data interoperability products and platforms. And then med devices, but I think most medical devices can be highly capital intensive, right? Manufacturing and development standpoint. So I think we do keep an eye on those, but those are some areas, Dave, to your point.
Terrific, thank you. So one of the things that we've been circling around here, I think, are how do we really move the needle in healthcare and maybe get beyond some of the, I'll call it the annual or smaller fluctuations in value and investment. Norm, some of the work that you are doing, bringing together bigger investors. Joan, what you mentioned with and I'd love to you to share a little bit about this, this, welcome
So
type,
how
type strategy. And then, the other one I want to bring in back to the, public sector is kind of the, ARPA-H is now just celebrating its first anniversary. We are, there were announcements about new hubs. There's now been announcements about some investment efforts. I think there's been some in Arizona. So just maybe if you could kick that off with what you've been looking at, and then we can dig into the rest of the team here.
So when I first started investing in this industry in 2007, and I thought I was a savvy investor because my first investments were in 1987. I'm like, oh, I know what I'm doing. The only two investments that I have ever lost money on were my first two life science investments. It's a different paradigm. There are different rules on what we look at. What makes a good tech company does not necessarily make a good biotech company. And so one of the things that we learn about very rapidly is what we call the valley of death. And I loved what you said about, healthcare back office. We have a great company in Arizona, AZBio Medicine, who again was doing AI before AI was sexy. And that's exactly what they're focused on. If they're not in your portfolio, they should be.
Love to. Yeah.
But the thing that we have to look at is the valley of death is real, and it is not a single valley. It is like riding a roller coaster. Okay, you get to a certain point, you've got non-dilutive funding, you're riding high with NIH. That grant ends, you're not getting any more money from them for at least another 9 months. The way their cycles flow, and you're going to hit this valley, and you better have something to bridge you. You're going to come up the other side, and now it's time for clinical trials. I got news for you. In most cases, NIH does not fund clinical trials. That is an anomaly that you saw in COVID. That is very unusual. And so there has to be funding for clinical trials. And by the way, it's not one clinical trial, it is multiple clinical trials and multiple stages of clinical trials. And then after you get through the clinical trials and you wait to see if you're going to pass, now you have to figure out how you're going to get paid for that product that you just created and how you're going to get people to use it. It is the most difficult, convoluted business model that I have ever seen in my 5-decade career as an investor.
Very different from other industries.
And so as we look at these things, we have to come up with new models, and Norm is doing that with his model. I like to focus on history. I like to see models that are proven. So in Arizona, you heard me say, we are really moving in Arizona. I will tell you, when I joined AZBio as its CEO 13 years ago, I did not have the ability to say those things. The rapid growth that we've seen, the progress that we have seen is the byproduct of over $27 billion invested over the last 20 years to put the infrastructure in place to see what we are now starting to see sprout up. Okay, that's a long time laying seeds and sowing fertilizer. And so it is not an overnight success. Boston was not an overnight success. North RTP was not an overnight success. It takes a long time. And so how do you make sure that that's a sustainable success? So I had the privilege of working with a family office, a Stetson family office out of New York, who worked with us for 3 years on a long-term strategic project to look at ecosystems all over the world. And we looked at what works in developing a life science ecosystem and what didn't. And so every single ecosystem had something that was really phenomenal. And so we pulled those things together like a patchwork quilt and created a new model that we think can be an engine to drive, not just in Arizona, but across the United States, sustained long-term health innovation investment. And so as a personal investor, okay, I can tell you I worked really hard for that money, and I do not want to place long-term bets on things that are not good. So the way that I addressed that is I said, okay, there's room for angels, but they're over here. Non-dilutive stocks here, philanthropic capital can be that solution, and that's what Norm's working on, that's what I'm working on, that's what many others are looking at. The difference is, in most cases, that capital is not sustained. It is not sustainable. You get it, you spend it, you get it, you spend it. What we stole from the Wellcome Trust, okay, is the idea of using long-term endowments. In 1975, the Wellcome Trust had the equivalent of $200 million in it. Today, it has the equivalent of $50 billion in it, roughly. And the difference is it has built over time through savvy investments while using its distribution to do good. That is what we were looking at. And then I was highly insulted when I was told that I was not going to live forever and I was not going to always manage that money. So we changed the law in Arizona, and the state treasurer will manage the trust forever. So we now know that there will always be someone responsible watching the store with full oversight as we continue to build this. But I'm happy to talk to people about that afterwards, but we're getting the 5-minute sign from Marty, so I want to pass this on.
Yeah, that's great. And really exciting. I definitely want to talk more about that. But so just as we kind of go into the wind down, would love to hear, especially from our two entrepreneurs. We've talked about a lot of different different approaches to funding here. What do you do going forward, and kind of what are you looking forward to over the next call it 3 to 5 years? I know it was forever in AI world, Jason, but where do things go and how do you leverage it?
Well, I think, we as drug discoverers and drug developers feel that there is a need for new mechanisms in this early to mid-stage space. So we got directly involved in building our own, this looking at development. And I think to Joan's point, part of the issue with the capital in that space is it needs to be sustained. And part of how we want to sustain it is by implementing a profit. So that it makes sense to put capital into that space and feel confident they'll have a return. To your point, we think that approach can also go a long way towards smoothing some of the volatility in biotech investment, essentially by using index orthogonal investments across baskets of promising assets. And that's an approach that isn't done right now because companies are invested in one at a time. They each are going through these roller coasters, and when they fail, their stock goes way down and way up, and it makes it more difficult to invest. So we've put a lot of statistical and quantitative thinking into that approach. And by the way, Burroughs Wellcome Fund paid for me to go to grad school. So it's part of my heart for it.
Got NIH and Burroughs Wellcome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Terrific. George.
I find myself in a very different place than most everybody here. People that are going to invest in what I'm producing and creating, we're going to have an enormous payback in a two-year period of time as soon as the working prototype is made. There's no 10-year bet. There's no 10-year lifespan. There's no 10-year interest on my part to even do it. Because other money, once this working prototype works, we'll be able to do it far more efficiently, far more rapidly, far more economically, easier distribution, easier manufacturing. What I need to do is to prove that I have in fact broken the cost code of creating the most inexpensive way to deliver point-of-care diagnostic for infectious disease, having modified workflow of nucleic acid amplification testing. That's my only challenge. It's not a technological challenge. It's an engineering challenge. And the patents that I have filed to support all this have opinions of patentability and freedom to operate behind them. And I need $10 million to make that happen. And hopefully sell this for many, many multiples of that in 2 years.
Is that $10 million today, or can you take it in tranches?
I could take it. But I mean, the end, most of it is for the design engineering and the work, and that's phased payments.
That sounds like the question from an interested potential investor.
Yeah,
Indeed.
exactly.
Correct. Sorry, I just want to hear, quick, actually, but a couple of questions here. Sure. If you guys want to.
Go ahead first. Well, I think I have a question for Jason though, because I was listening to John McDonald's fireside chat on Novo Nordisk yesterday. And I found it was candid because it addressed pretty much this valley of death issue. And his pitch, of course, was, well, we can accelerate that time to market, get you through the phase 3 trial. So the question, Jason, then is that also something that you will provide with your new company, the infrastructure, the capabilities to kind of help these companies work through that process faster?
So where we see the gap is in taking a drug program that's in what called either the lead or DC stage, which is the first point at which it has IP, and getting it through the first set of trials, which are known as phase 1 trials. That's where we think the valley of death is for the most innovative programs. So we focus there. There is a pretty robust ecosystem for funding good assets in post phase 1 through phase 2 and phase 3. And that money comes from large VC, very experienced life science VC. It comes from pharma, but also it increasingly comes from private capital markets. So PE is active in that space as well. We think that, pharma is facing a patent cliff, 27, 28. It's sitting on a huge amount of capital. It needs assets to be able to replenish its portfolio. And we think there's a pretty straightforward way to fill a white space and move all of those assets out of that stage into phase 2 and phase 3. And that's why we built Synkrino development.
Sorry to throw cold water on all of this, but what about getting reimbursement approval for anything you're doing? Because I'm actually engaged to a woman who she was the head nurse at the GI cath lab, and they yanked her out of that and put her in insurance reclamation, where she takes 10 times her salary every year and reclaimed insurance claims, and it barely scratches the surface of the hospital when it's all 20%.
So, let me take that.
Yeah, I think you.
Reimbursement, the United States has arguably one of the best healthcare systems in the world. It also has the most convoluted value chain.
Define system.
From innovation to the
Selection.
patient.
Okay.
Okay, if you look at what we have more new drugs and therapies available for patients than any other country in the world, okay, hands down.
We're really good at stuff.
We are really good at creating stuff. We are not really good at managing costs along the value chain. And we have, in our free market systems, created so many levels of cost in that value chain.
We've dealt with the cost of providing
We've
services.
created problems. For our innovators, designing with reimbursement in mind from the beginning is something that we need to do a better job of teaching. Jason, would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree.
And I can speak for my own ecosystem where I have a PhD that does nothing but work with our entrepreneurs on the nuts and bolts of running a business and the things that they have to look at, which includes reimbursement, quality management systems, which, by the way, you have a quality management problem and the FDA shuts you down. If you're a small business, you don't recover. So those are things that we really focus on in between the exciting things that everybody wants to talk about. But the reality is, if you don't know how to block and tackle, okay, or using an equine example, if you start knocking down gates, you're not going to win the race. And so, all of those things, it is a very different, and I came out of semiconductor, okay, which is not an easy technology thing either, especially when I was in the semiconductors in the 80s and the 90s when the Silicon Valley was actually based on silicon. And it was a different world. What we are dealing with now in this revolution for biotechnology is completely different, but it truly does have the ability to change our global way of life if we figure out how to do it right.
Awesome. I think that's a really good wrap up spot right there. So thank you all. Thank you, Marty. Norm, please heal up and hopefully we'll see you in person next time. Great.